Okay, hi everybody. We are going to talk about standard norm referenced assessment today, and we will discuss some of the issues related to creating the assessment instrument, selecting it as a clinician, and some of the pitfalls to be aware of. Okay, so let's get started. And if I can get this thing to work here, there we go. Standard norm referenced assessment. There's the title. And number one, we're using the term standard here, standard. And I want to contrast standard data collection techniques and with non-standard data collection techniques. Now, make a note that I'm not using the term formal or informal. I'm not saying formal data collection techniques compared to informal. I'm indicating standard versus non-standard. Those are the terms I'm using. Why not formal or informal? Because regardless of the assessment technique we choose to use as speech-language pathologists, we're operating professionally with reference to collecting or gathering quantitative data. And so nobody wants to hear that we're doing an informal armchair type assessment. No. Regardless of the assessment technique, data collection, or data analysis technique we are using, we are being systematic. So we're going to refer to data collection technique and all types of assessment that we do in a speech-language diagnostic as standard or non-standard. Now the distinction is standard assessment data collection techniques, that is gathering the information. Data collection refers to gathering the information. We'll be analyzing. The information about behavior we'll be analyzing, gathering that information. We gather that information in a standard assessment in the way that the assessment instrument dictates. And in a standard norm referenced assessment, the data collection technique is dictated by a formally published document. Standard norm referenced assessments are published documents that tell us exactly how to speak to the client, what kinds of materials to use, how to collect the information, how to start the assessment, when to stop the assessment, etc. How to write down what the client does or says while the assessment goes on. That is standard data collection technique. And let me hold this up on the Goldman Fristo. I have something here called the Administrator's Manual. And this manual right here, a manual like this accompanies any published standard norm referenced assessment, and you as the clinician are obligated to read, open that manual up and read and learn exactly how you are supposed to administer the assessment and collect, that is, gather your data. Non-standard assessment data collection techniques also are dictated by the assessment procedure, by typically a publication, but it's a research publication or text publication. And in non-standard data collection technique, the speech-language pathologist, the clinician, has some leeway, has the option to contribute to the data collection procedure. Examples of non-standard data collection techniques are the spontaneous language sample, where you create a play situation typically for the client, or if it's an older client, a conversational situation, or a prompted data collection situation. And the decision as to what toys to use, for example, what materials to use, what to talk about in a conversation, etc., that's left to both the clinician and the client. It's more client directed. But the manner of collecting the information once the interaction is initiated is still systematic and systematically described by the assessment technique that you choose to follow. Examples of spontaneous language sample techniques are the Bloom and Leahy language sample, or maybe a phonological sample as dictated by, say, Schreiberg or Klein, Hodson and Patton, or others. Now, the language sample can be prompted by a narrative, for example, the frog story, or a familiar story perhaps that the client knows, or a conversational topic that we know the client is interested in. It's way more client-oriented than the standard norm reference data collection technique. Still, it is systematic. I also want to point out that Piagetian analyses are also non-standard, or although more structured and a little more dictated by publication, so that we typically evaluate conservation or sensory motor behavior, sensory motor problem solving and reasoning, and we use a technique called critical exploration, where we query the client to understand what's going on in the client's mind, how the client is thinking about and reasoning about a problem-solving situation. That critical exploration, that conversation we have with the client, that is left to us, the clinician, once we learn the technique. Yet, again, the entire assessment remains systematic. So that is some distinction between standard data collection technique, which is dictated by the assessment publication, and we really have no latitude typically, or very little latitude, in how we collect the data. We follow slavishly, so to speak, instructions given to us in these manuals that are published with the written assessments. Non-standard data collection technique with reference to the client, we clinicians have more latitude in collecting the information. Collecting the information for analysis is the first step in the actual assessment process.